Today we're going to look at the different ways in which we can find and make news. This becomes particularly important because as public relations practitioners, this is what we do for the client or the organization that we're representing. Part of the challenge in making news most largely is the fact that we're exposed to so many different messages on any given day. So we have information overload. And what that means is how the challenge it presents for us as public relations practitioners is figuring out how do we break through and connect with our stakeholders. Also, you have to figure out what is news, what qualifies as something where we can reach out to a journalist or to a blogger in order to generate publicity. So what we're going to do now is walk through a number of news determinants. Kind of think of it as a litmus test for news. So if we have some of these different characteristics present, then we can presume that we have an event or a situation that is newsworthy. So the first one here is timeliness. What we will want to do is think about what's going on in the larger news. So what's going on in terms of government or in terms of holidays? Are there any sort of issues where we can present our organization or our client as a subject matter expert? Right? So you've probably seen the acronym SME, subject matter expert. I used to work in a healthcare setting in public relations, and what we would do when holidays came around. So if you think about Halloween, for example, we would have a primary care physician who we would connect with the local news, have them go on the television in order to do segments about safe candy practices. So what parents should know in order to keep their children safe. Right? So that's a way that we can look at what we do as an organization and tie it in with timeliness in terms of the holidays. Some other things you'll want to consider are prominence and proximity. So prominence, obviously, if we have anyone who is seen as famous or quasi-famous in the public eye. So this might be a strong athlete, it might be someone who's won a local or national competition. If we can have an actor and actress stand behind our cause, right? That's why a lot of times organizations will budget a lot of money in order to have a prominent keynote speaker attend an event so that they're able to attract larger donations and more RSVPs. Proximity is also important because with that, it's when we're able to tell someone this is what's going on in your own backyard. And so typically we like to be informed of what's going on geographically around us because it's much more likely that that is going to have some sort of effect or bearing on our life. A couple other things to consider that will help us determine whether or not something is newsworthy is the significance. And this is something we're going to talk about repeatedly throughout the semester. You're answering the so what question. So what you want to be able to do is make sure that when any stakeholder reads a press release or a fact sheet, a brochure, it applies to them. Right? So we're answering the so what question. Why do they need this information? Why do they need to know about your organization? Why do they need to know about the client you're representing? If we can make it significant for them, if we can answer the so what question, we're much more likely to develop and maintain a relationship with that particular stakeholder. If we have things that are unusual, that can also be a reason to issue a press release or some type of a newsreel. I recently saw that a gentleman in India just made it into the Guinness Book of World Records for giving the most amount of hugs in the shortest amount of time. Right? Human interest, this is when we're thinking about the things that tend to be more emotionally based, something that makes you feel really good. One way that we can see this, if we think about how we recently had Labor Day, A lot of times, news stations and organizations will find a way to feature men and women who have served their country and to connect on that level. Conflict is another good one. And if we have ongoing controversy or issues, a lot of times we see this in regards to legislature. So if there are going to be new policies or procedures that can impact your organization or its stakeholders. As I mentioned, I used to work in the healthcare sector. And when we were talking about the advent of Obamacare, that had some direct implications for our stakeholders. And so our CEO would do a number of op-ed pieces and other position statement papers in order to say where we as a faith-based nonprofit stood on the issue. Finally, you can also look at the newness of it. And in a lot of ways, this ties in with timeliness that we talked about on a previous slide. But anytime something is novel, that is automatic reason enough to go ahead and issue the press release, to put something out on social media or on the corporate webpage. So how do we find this news? If we know our job as a public relations practitioner is to make sure that we are providing new information to our stakeholders, where is this coming from? What is going to be very, very important for you as a PR practitioner, whether you're in an agency or you work in-house. So again, working in-house is, for example, if you worked at Western Michigan University on their public relations team, all you're doing is PR for Western. If you work at an agency, it's more likely that you will have multiple clients at any given time. So you might work you might work for a local grocery store, you might work for a local sports team, and perhaps a local florist, right? But regardless, you need to get to know people. You need them to know that they can trust you. You need to educate them on what news is. You want to err on the side where they're contacting you more frequently than less. So it's better for them to call and say, hey, this may or may not be news, and let you decide before it happens, instead of saying, oh, by the way, last week we had this great news story. Well, then you can't really do anything about it. So you're thinking internally, you're making sure that everyone in the organization knows who you are, what you do, and that they can come to you. Externally, this is where you'll have a number of Google alerts and other similar functions set up so that when things in the local community or at various levels of government are going on that coincide with your organization, that you're aware of it. So you can start to figure out, how is it that my organization can weigh in and capitalize on this? Other ways that you can create news, obviously we can do different types of events. Our book discusses pseudo events and makes them a little bit different from more traditional events. You can think of them as the same. We're actually going to look at events on the next slide, but here they talk about pseudo events. So these are things that were created in many ways to gain notoriety or to create news. And they talk about developing creative instincts. That is a kind of a convoluted way to acknowledge the fact that PR is based on relationships. So just as we were saying that you need strong relationships with those inside the organization or inside, if you're at the agency, the number of clients that you have, so that they know they can come to you and pitch ideas to you, so that you have those eyes and ears in the meetings, in the the corners of the organization that you're not privy to. When I worked in the healthcare setting, it is a huge organization with a number of different departments and levels and hierarchies. So it was getting to know people and developing trusted relationships with formal managers and other key stakeholders that allowed me to have access to news. You can also think about brainstorming sessions. So you might do this with senior leadership, you might do this with other communication personnel, you might do this with formal managers at different levels. So you can typically once or twice a year sit down with a number of different groups and say, what do you have going on this year? What do I need to be aware of? What great work are we doing that we can present to the community? A few more things that we can look at. As I mentioned, special events. We talked about those on the previous page. And this, capitalize on what you have in your organization. So when I was in the healthcare setting, people like access to physicians. Physicians have specialized information that many of us don't understand or don't know how to interpret when we're looking at it on our own. So if we have an event where you can talk to an orthopedic surgeon, or you have access to an OBGYN, and they give you some background information, right? Then that's a way that we capitalize on our subject matter experts, and we're able to increase public awareness of what we do. You can also hold contests. Radio and television stations are particularly good at this. Polls and surveys, especially online and through social media, it's a very, very easy way in order to engage your consumers, right? So it can be as simple as saying, do you like the red shirt or the blue shirt better? And then offering, once someone casts their vote, offering them a percentage off or a coupon tends to be a fairly common practice. Top 10 lists are another way. More recently, Idaho Potato Farmers Association was working with Edelman, which is a really large PR firm, in order to do a top 10 list of why you needed potatoes in your everyday diet, right? Why this was a dietary staple. And product demonstrations can be great too. So we don't have to think about this and just simply come here and we'll show you how to use this new iPhone or this other new piece of technology, but it's also a chance for people to, if you open a new store or a new aspect in your organization has had a facelift or some other type of improvement, that's a way in which we can connect with our community. You can also think about publicity stunts. These can go either very, very well or very, very poorly. One that comes to mind that you'll read about in your text is a company in Boston who planted briefcases all around the city with clues that would ultimately, they hoped, result in people rendezvousing at this one point so they could introduce this new product. And this was before the Boston bombing. But still, people ended up thinking that maybe these suitcases had bombs or other types of lethal devices included. And so the CIA was called in. Obviously, this didn't work out the way in which the company intended. You might also think about different awards, right? If your organization is doing good things or being acknowledged by other governing bodies, and that is something that consumers should know about because it gives us an extra level of credibility.